How far would you go to uncover the truth about the ones you love? For David Carter, a devoted father, the answer was simple: as far as it takes. When his 10-year-old daughter tragically passed away in what seemed like a freak accident, the official story didn't sit right with him. What if it wasn't just an accident? What if someone was hiding something? Armed with nothing but his determination and a hidden camera, David began a journey to seek answers. What he found was more chilling than he could have imagined, and it would lead to a fight not just for his daughter, but for countless others who had been failed by a broken system. Find out the truth in today's story and also let us know where you're listening from. David Carter's life revolved around his 10-year-old daughter, Nia. Living in the heart of Atlanta, their modest home in East Point was filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Since Nia's mother had left years ago, the two of them had formed an inseparable bond. David's world brightened every time he saw Nia's wide smile or heard her bubbly laughter. That morning was no different. Nia sat at the kitchen table, sketching with her favorite colored pencils while David made breakfast. She was working on a picture of the two of them standing hand in hand under a large tree. "Make sure you get my muscles right," David teased, flexing his arm as he set her plate down. Nia giggled and held up her drawing. "You're the strongest dad in the world," she said with a grin. David leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "Don't you forget it," he replied. But he couldn't have known that would be the last time he'd hear her laugh. By late afternoon, Nia begged to visit the neighborhood playground. David hesitated but eventually relented, promising to pick her up in an hour. He returned to his paperwork but kept glancing at the clock, uneasy for reasons he couldn't explain. Then the phone rang. David's heart sank before he even picked up. On the other end, a calm, rehearsed voice said, "Mr. Carter, we need you to come to Memorial Hospital. It's about your daughter." The drive was a blur. When he arrived, the doctor's words pierced his soul. "We did everything we could. She's gone." The official report claimed Nia had fallen from the jungle gym and hit her head, a tragic accident. But as David stared at her lifeless body, the emptiness in his heart was accompanied by a growing sense that something wasn't right. Nia's funeral was arranged quickly, almost too quickly for David to process. Friends and neighbors offered their condolences, but their words felt hollow. At the wake, David noticed things that made his grief more unbearable. Nia's body, lying peacefully in the coffin, had bruises on her arms and legs that the autopsy report didn't mention. Beneath her small, delicate fingernails there was dirt, as though she had clawed at something. "She didn't have this dirt before," he whispered to his sister, Tiana, who had flown in from Chicago for the funeral. "You're exhausted," Tiana said, glancing nervously at the funeral staff. "Let her rest." But David couldn't. Something gnawed at him. That night, as he lay in bed replaying every detail, he made a desperate decision. He would find out the truth, no matter what. The next morning, David went to an electronics store and bought a hidden camera. Back home, he carefully installed it inside the lining of Nia's coffin, positioning it to capture the interior. It felt wrong, violating, but his instincts screamed that he wasn't wrong to question. When Tiana visited later, David told her what he had done. She was horrified. "You put a camera in her coffin?" she asked. "David, you're spiraling." "And what if I'm not?" he snapped. "What if they're hiding something because we're black? What if they just wrote her off?" Tiana softened but still looked unsure. "And what if you're wrong? Then I'll live with that," David said. "But I won't give up on her." That night, David sat in front of his computer, watching the live feed from the camera. Hours passed with nothing but darkness on the screen. He was ready to call himself paranoid when, at midnight, he saw it, the faintest flicker of movement. Then came a scraping noise. David's heart raced. Leaning closer, he rewound the footage and replayed it. A shadow shifted across the frame, accompanied by the sound of something scraping against wood. Then came muffled voices. "Quick! They won't even notice." David tried to bring the footage to the police, but they dismissed it as inconclusive. The detective barely glanced at the flash drive before sighing. "Focus on grieving." He handed it back to David, his expression detached. "I understand you're upset, but this footage doesn't prove anything. It could be interference, shadows, or even a malfunction. There's no solid evidence here." David's chest tightened. "Interference? Shadows? You're not even trying to understand. Did you listen to the voices? They said quick, or they won't even notice. How can you ignore that?" The detective's face hardened. "I know this is difficult for you, Mr. Carter, but we can't pursue every suspicion. I suggest you take this time to grieve and let us handle the facts. It's not healthy to dwell on conspiracy theories." Frustrated and betrayed, David left the station clutching the flash drive. The detective's words replayed in his mind, cutting deeper each time. They didn't care, not about him, not about Nia. He realized that if he wanted justice, he'd have to find another way to uncover the truth. Frustrated, David turned to the media. A young journalist, Sophia Morales, agreed to help after watching the footage. Together, they uncovered a disturbing history of malpractice at Willow Valley Funeral Home. Sophia's investigation led them to Michael Gaines, a former funeral home employee. Michael revealed unethical practices, reusing caskets, tampering with bodies, and falsifying records. Sophia published the story, sparking outrage. Under pressure, the police reopened Nia's case. But David and Sophia faced threats. One night, David found the words, "Stop digging," spray-painted on his garage door. Tiana begged him to stop, but David's resolve only strengthened. With Michael's testimony and the growing public outcry, the case went to court. The funeral home's lawyers tried to discredit David and the footage, calling it unreliable. But Michael's detailed account of malpractice and the damning audio from the camera turned the tide. The courtroom was tense as the jury delivered their verdict, guilty. The words seemed to hang in the air, their weight settling over the room like a heavy blanket. A gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by murmurs that quickly subsided under the judge's sharp gavel. For a brief moment, David allowed himself to exhale. The funeral home was ordered to pay damages, and several employees, including the director, faced criminal charges. Their expressions remained stoic, but David could see the faint cracks of tension in their composure. Justice had been served, but it felt bittersweet. As the crowd filed out, David stayed seated, staring at the spot where the director had been moments before. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. This was about Nia, about ensuring that no one else would endure the pain he'd been forced to bear. He clenched his fists, feeling the edges of triumph edged with an unrelenting ache. Later, as reporters swarmed him outside the courthouse, asking how he felt, David's response was measured. "I feel relief that we got some answers. But this isn't just about my daughter. This is about every family who has been ignored, dismissed, or hurt by negligence." His voice cracked slightly, but he held his ground. "We can't bring Nia back, but we can make sure her story leads to change." That evening, back at home, David sat in the quiet of his living room, staring at the framed photo of Nia that he'd placed on the mantel. Though justice was served, it couldn't bring her back. Yet, in her absence, she had given him a purpose, a way to honor her by continuing the fight for others who needed a voice. In the months that followed, David and Tiana founded the NIA Carter Foundation, dedicated to fighting negligence and discrimination in healthcare and funeral services. Sophia's continued coverage pushed for legislative changes, and the threats against David eventually ceased. One afternoon, while cleaning Nia's room, David found her unfinished drawing. He framed it and hung it in the living room. Beneath the picture, Nia had written, "Always together, Dad." As David stood beneath the Atlanta sun, he felt Nia's memory guiding him. Though the fight wasn't over, he was ready to stand up for families like his, families who deserved answers and justice. What would you do if faced with David's situation? Would you trust the official explanations, or would you fight against the odds to uncover the truth? This story is a reflection of the lengths we're willing to go for those we love and the resilience it takes to stand against a broken system. We'd love to hear your thoughts. How did this story make you feel? Share your thoughts, ideas, or similar experiences in the comments below. And thank you for listening to Storyline Narratives.